This is Radio for the Blind, communications from the island of North America to the global south. This book is dedicated to the human beings of the world who would consider themselves a part of the global south regardless of geography. I speak for myself and others. I share a voice in your suffering. Our voices may be hushed, but they are never silent. Here, they may find emphasis. We are listening. We love you. Chapter 2, Forgotten Country. In case anyone was feeling forgotten country today, realize that only one of the two may have your back. 58,151 Americans were killed in the Vietnam War. Compare this number to the over 150,000 Vietnam vets who have since taken their own lives, and you will begin to get an idea of just how expendable you are. The system of governments and war in this world is simply a massive game of chess for the exorbitantly wealthy and the exceptionally bored. The governing system in the United States is and always has been by the people and for the people, but those who are considered pawns are not considered to be people by our government, it seems. The steps to follow are simple. 1. Keep the population struggling financially. This encourages the younger generations to grow up wanting to be the financial saviors of their families. There are also many other benefits to this, which we will not be going into just yet. 2. Create a system that financially recognizes a formally educated person over a legitimately intelligent individual. Even someone with the silliest of majors will typically earn more than someone with no college education, regardless of talent, intelligence, or experience. 3. Make receiving a formal education so ridiculously expensive that only the very wealthy can afford such education without going into a tremendous amount of debt. 4. Offer a get-out-of-jail-free card by creating a package deal that will attract the people listed in number 1, the saviors. Offer a free education in exchange for some soldiering, knowing that many of the nation's poor will jump on this opportunity to save their own fates and the fates of their families. 5. When something is happening somewhere in the world that negatively affects your financial interests, you may now send these educated soldiers to wherever the action is and let them be the pawns they are. With the right amount of patriotism, they will all feel like knights and rooks and bishops, but none of them are anything more than pawns. 6. Rinse, wash, repeat. In a financially downtrodden society, even the most horrific war stories, those from the actual battlefield and those from the figurative one, will not be enough to dissuade potential new recruits from wanting a shot at the shiny offer listed at number 4, the get-out-of-jail-free card. My fellow patriotic Americans, I hate to say it to you, and I am speaking most primarily to the common person in this, but our government does not represent the country that we love. The country that we love is composed of individual Americans with names and lives and stories and smiles and everything else that comes along with being human. Our government would fool us to believe that they are one of us, because they are also made up of human beings who feel and love and appreciate a good smile and a hearty laugh when appropriate, but they are all stuck within a system that is larger than their own ideals, and they must either work within that system or be torn to shreds by it, much like we experience ourselves on the day-to-day. Many of them have put a great deal into their careers, and they know of no other way to live, which is one reason why they ensure that their own futures are well tended when they are released from governmental service. The idea of working against the system to improve the situation of the common person is one that will ultimately take money from their own pockets, so it is a difficult decision to make. It is easy for them to see from their positions not only how absolutely massive a task like this would be. A properly sized task such as this, mind you, will often appear as something relatively close to impossible, although it never is. But that reducing their own salaries would be such a tiny drop in the great proverbial bucket that it would not even seem to make a difference. The time to organize is now. The time to organize peacefully is now. We are not fools, though we have been treated as such. The financial disparities of the world are a product of evolution, not intelligence, skill, or talent. We will explore this statement further at some other time. There are always exceptions to every rule, but for the most part, the wealthy families of the world remain the wealthy families of the world and the poor middle-class families of the world remain the poor middle-class families. More often than not, the countries of the world, not just ours, mind you, are run by those who are wealthy, or at least wealthier than the average person that they govern. However, the wealthy of the world do not make up the bulk of its population. Therefore, those who are governing do not properly represent those who they govern. I remember an old slogan from a time when our country was still young and under the rule of a governing force that did not properly represent the people that it governed. No taxation without representation. We are paying for everything. Every step along the way, we pay for it. When we gain income and pay income tax, or when we make a purchase and pay sales tax. These are the most obvious ways in which we pay, but the methods for our government to tax us have become couched within the interests of the many companies that exist today. Almost every time that money changes hands in this country, our government gets a piece of it, and the companies who are making these deals are adjusting the prices that we pay to them to compensate for this. Think of a plastic 2-liter bottle of Pepsi and everything that goes into its production. Think about not only the purchase of the Pepsi and the sales tax involved in that transaction, but every step along the way. Think about the store that sold it to you. Think about the distributor that sold it to that store. Think about the bottling plant that packaged it. The plant that made the bottles, the lids, the labels, the Pepsi itself. Think about the ingredients and what went into the manufacturing of those ingredients, etc. Every step along the way, our government is being paid quite handsomely, and though these payments are couched within the several companies that it takes to manufacture a single plastic 2-liter bottle of Pepsi, ultimately, the people are the ones who pay. For example, in 2008, Pepsi earned a net income of $5,142 million and paid $1,338 million in taxes. This is quite a handsome sum. And when your government paycheck is dependent upon the receipt of monies to the government, it is the people who speak in billions who will have the loudest voices in your ears, not those who deal in pennies like the common person must do. So, my fellow common Americans, I would ask you this. Why do we perpetuate this system? Too big to fail is a hoax and an illusion. There is no such thing. Being stuck within this system does not mean that we cannot escape it and rebuild it completely. Disengage in commerce as much as you possibly can. Realize that our needs are often governed to us through the many advertisements that we see. Realize that for the most part, our government, despite how much we would like for it to, does not have the best interests of the common person in mind. Realize that this is true for every government in the world. This means that the bulk of the world's population is improperly represented in its various governments. This also means that the political borders that make up the many countries of this world are created and maintained by those who would use us all as pawns in their massive game of chess. This also means that we, as the common people of the world, may recognize our own power and lack of representation, and therefore organize ourselves accordingly. The Congress of the Global South. I propose that we, the common people of the world, create a Congress for ourselves that does not recognize the governing agents of this world as anything further than a means to represent the interests of those who would tell us what to buy, what to believe, what to need, or what to do. We may recognize them in their several forums, senates, parliaments, congresses, and the like, and in those forums tell them what it is that we will do. We will not ask for their opinions to aid us in our decisions, for we recognize that they do not represent us but themselves, though they are welcome to join us in our cause. We will abstain from violence at all costs, for we recognize that violence is a methodology that will just engender fear. If one life is lost in the process of securing for ourselves a balanced world, it is a tragedy that goes beyond compare, for it will be a life that we have lost from our own ranks, for we will not take a life ourselves. The change in the world that we seek begins in our hearts, not in our governments. It extends from there into our thoughts, our words, and our actions. We decide our own fates, and we build for ourselves what will become for us our individual futures. These individual futures become society's future. Therefore, it is something that we build ourselves, both individually and symbiotically. We have been kept enslaved without the actuality of chains for so long now that we have come to recognize it as a normal way of life.
Yes.
I assure you, my friends, I have seen firsthand that the definition of a normal way of life is a varying one, and the variations are tremendous by degree. You may call me crazy if you would like. You may call me paranoid or delusional, or whatever it is that you may choose to call me, but you cannot call me ignorant and be speaking anything of the truth. For I see the world from the people's view, from the trenches, from the ditches, from the dirt. And from the dirt, it is apparent that we are here to keep the many others who would maintain a guise of cleanliness from ever lying down themselves.